panel discussion on integrating appreciative inquiry into mindfulness-based leadership. First, what is mindfulness? In Sinhala, we call it Sihiya. Mindfulness is actually achieving a state where a particular individual can fully focus on the current situation that he or she is facing, and also at the same time grasps the full knowledge of the feelings, of the anxiety, of all the things that affects him or her in that particular moment. That is mindfulness. Then what is leadership? Once again in Sinhala we call it Nayakatve. Leadership is the ability to actually lead a particular group of people, to navigate a group of people, to guide a group of people into actually achieving a particular target, achieving goals, and achieving deadlines or commitments at the end of the day. That is leadership. So how do we incorporate this mindfulness and this leadership together? As a human being, how do we communicate these two aspects of life? That is the session that we are going to dive into today. So first of all, I would like to invite Professor Ajit De Silva, Dean of Faculty of Graduate Studies, University of Moratuwa, to formally welcome you all on this grand event.
Thank you, Janet. Ayubowan. Gamini, you can give the deciphering to Jim and Beverly. So it's a warm welcome as we start a workshop, a panel discussion on integrating appreciative inquiry into the mindfulness-based leadership. And we have with us three eminent personnel who has dabbed on this topic, as well as been pioneering, as well as undergone the study program at the initial stages. So it's my pleasant task on behalf of University of Moratuwa to welcome you to this event. So Dr. Jim Ludeima, who is actually the Dean of School of Business of Calvin University, and who actually started in the Benedictine University in USA, the founder for the Center for Value-Driven Leadership. I suppose we all can understand the value of having value-driven leadership as we search deeply or with a wider net on identifying leaders. So it's quite interesting. Now he has moved from to the Calvin University. And Dr. Beverly Ludeima, who is a clinical psychologist practicing, of course coming from the university as well earlier, in St. Charles, USA. And of course, Dr. Gamini Hevavasam, who we fondly call as GB, about 2 years back, he walked in, initiated this relationship with the University of Moratuwa, is quite keen to have this relationship being built upon. And we also identified it's quite interesting. So here we are today. Of course, the gestation period had been 2 years from the initial discussion to date. So, but we hope, we had a discussion about the hockey stick scenario, and this is the relationship building exercise, opening up with the idea, and hope we will venture into a partnership as well as across universities, not just Moratuwa, and having, of course, Gamini having a center started in Mihimtale. And so it's hopefully would be interesting. We need to engage in this type of research and discussion and discourse. That's really important. So again, welcoming you all. So we can start the presentations and the panel discussion. And really we value your presence and giving time to us. And of course, this is not the only, we have it live streaming. And as you discussed about, have you gone to the library today? We are discussing that. So a lot less people here maybe. Now we are connecting on the live streaming platform, and some are very keen that they will not participate right now. They will be listening to that in time to come. So think about it as the audience is spread over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ajit. Next, I would like to warmly welcome Mr. Dinuvan Chambara to introduce the speakers of this evening.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guest, esteemed Professor Ajit De Alvis, the Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies, esteemed panelists, dear colleagues and students. It is with great pleasure that I stand here before you, a proud product of University of Moratuwa, representing the middle level management as an engineer. As we dwell into the topic of integrating appreciative-based inquiry into mindfulness-based leadership, I cannot help but emphasize the significance of practicing mindfulness in our lives. In our journey through academia, we are often trained to memorize and recall theoretical concepts. However, do we truly embrace and embody practical mindful concepts to enhance our productivity? That's a big question. That is the question that lingers in my mind and in our minds. Today we have the privilege of having a panel of experts who will shed light on this important matter. Allow me to introduce our esteemed panelists who have graciously joined us here today, each with unique expertise and invaluable contributions to the fields of leadership, organizational development, mental health, and bridging academia with the professional world. First and foremost, we have Dr. Jim Ludema, a renowned scholar, consultant, and educator in the field of leadership and organizational development. His expertise spans a wide range of areas, including appreciative inquiry and positive change. Dr. Ludema has served as a professor of organizational development and is the founder of the Center of Values-Driven Leadership at Benedictine University, USA. And also he is the current Dean of the Business School at Calvin University. We are honored to have him with us today. Next, we have Dr. Beverly Ludema, a distinguished clinical psychologist specializing in behavioral health therapy. She has dedicated her career to helping individuals improve their mental health and overall well-being. Dr. Beverly Ludema excels in diagnosing and treating a wide range of mental health conditions, including anxiety, depression, trauma-related disorders, and relationship issues. Her expertise will undoubtedly provide us with valuable insights into the introspection of mindfulness and mental well-being. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, I am thrilled to introduce my boss and mentor, Dr. G.B. Hevavasam, a true scholar, practitioner, and serial entrepreneur. Dr. Hevavasam holds leadership positions in various organizations, including Fine Finish Engineering, INT Terminal LLC, and Mano Lead Research Center, among others. His unique expertise lies in bridging academia and the professional world, applying research insights and sharing practical experience with academic and business communities alike. His presence here today is a testament to his commitment to advancing the field of mindfulness-based leadership. I am witnessing how he has changed our mindset, my mindset, in giving back to the society and influencing us not to be better managers, but better humans, and being practical in the best sense. I must express my greatest gratitude for the opportunity to spend quality time with these remarkable individuals for the past few days. The discussions we have had and the knowledge they have shared are truly invaluable. I am confident that their expertise and perspectives will open our minds to a whole new reality. As we embark on this journey of integrating appreciative-based inquiry into mindfulness-based relationship, I encourage each and every one of you to embrace this unique opportunity. Open your minds, absorb the wisdom that will be shared, and allow it to transform your approach to leadership and well-being. It is my sincerest hope that today's event will inspire you to adopt mindfulness as a way of life and to cultivate positive, appreciative mindset in aspects of your journey. Together we can create a future where mindful leadership flourishes and our communities thrive, and this is what we Sri Lankans need. Thank you for your presence here today, and may you enjoy this enlightening experience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Denwan, for introducing our guest speakers and sharing your thoughts with us. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Jim Ludema, the Dean of School of Business of Calvin University. Sir, the podium is all yours.
May I close this laptop? Close the top and just lay my book on there? Just like. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that warm introduction. And Denwan, where did you go? Thank you also for that very warm introduction. For Beverly and me, it is a pleasure to be here today. And I also want to thank Dr. De Alves for your very warm welcome and all of your colleagues here at Moratua University. Also, thank you to you, Dr. G.B. Hiwawasam, for hosting us here in Sri Lanka. My wife Beverly and I have been here in Sri Lanka now for about 10 days. We've been all over the country, and Beverly and I have, I think, traveled to maybe 85 countries around the world, maybe more. And we think that Sri Lanka has got to be the most beautiful place on the planet. Not only the natural beauty, but the historical beauty and the warmth with which we have been welcomed here by Sri Lankan people and Sri Lankan communities across the country. So thank you very much for that. Also, thank you very much for all of you who showed up here this afternoon for this presentation. We appreciate you being here, and those online as well. I'm supposed to talk about appreciative inquiry, mindfulness, and leadership, and I will, but I want to reverse the order a little bit. First, I want to talk about mindfulness, and then I'll talk a little bit about appreciative inquiry and leadership. As Denwan mentioned, I'm now the Dean of the School of Business at Calvin University, and I love it. But prior to that, I was the director of the Center for Values-Driven Leadership at Benedictine University. And we started that center at Benedictine University because our belief was that the sole purpose of all business should be to serve society and to serve the community, to serve the common good of humanity. And we wanted to start a center that researched that and tried to understand what are the forces and factors that make that possible. What are the forces and factors at the individual level in terms of how people lead? What are the forces and factors at the organizational level in terms of how organizations change and structure themselves and govern themselves? And we wanted to understand that at the societal level, how business can make a positive impact on society through the work that it does, the products it produces, and the way that it treats people and communities. One of the programs that we started in the Center for Values-Driven Leadership was a PhD program in values-driven leadership. And it was a PhD program for senior executives in business. So in the program, most of the students were in their 40s or 50s, and they were CEOs, COOs, presidents of companies, generals in the Army, executives of all kinds at fairly senior levels across the sectors. One of the students that I had the privilege of teaching in that values-driven leadership program was Dr. G.B. Hiwawasam. And when he came into the program, he wasn't Dr. G.B. Hiwawasam, he was just Gamini Hiwawasam. But he did an amazing dissertation. He did a dissertation on the impact of meditation and mindfulness on leadership. And he had many different findings. Well, I should add that this was a qualitative dissertation. Now, here I understand that almost all of the research and all of the dissertations you do are quantitative. You love numbers, you love analytics, and I understand that. Although I am a philosophy major by training, and I've been in the field of leadership and organizational behavior for years, my father was a mechanical engineer. He was a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Michigan in the United States, and so I grew up in that environment, and I love people who love numbers, who love engineering, and who love the field of hard science. But I'm going to talk a little bit today about the field of softer science, human science, and back to Dr. Hiwawa-sam's dissertation. He did a qualitative dissertation, one of the most interesting and imaginative research designs I've ever seen. He wanted to understand the impact of mindfulness and meditation on leadership. So he recruited 26 global leaders, as I mentioned, CEOs, COOs, senior military officers, etc., people who worked on a global scale. And he invited them to be part of a 12-week process where they would commit to practicing meditation and mindfulness every day for 12 weeks. In addition, he recruited 4 world-renowned Buddhist monks. And I have their names here, and I'm going to read them. Do my best anyway. Bhante Gunaranthana, Bhante Silananda, Bhante Rahula, and Bhante Jayasara. I think 2 of them were from Sri Lanka, and 2 of them currently residing in the United States. So in this 12-week research design, each week on a Saturday, we would have a session with one of the Bhantes for 12 weeks. And they would do some Buddhist teachings around mindfulness and meditation. Then they would guide us through some activities of mindfulness and meditation. And then they would answer any questions that we had. Meanwhile, each of us, and I did it too, along with all of the executives, would practice mindfulness and meditation each day and journal. Gamini or Dr. Hiwawa-sam created a little online journal where we would go in and we would say, okay, here's what I did today. Here's the impact I'm seeing on myself and my inner being, and here's the impact that I am seeing in my leadership. We would keep a journal. And then Dr. Hiwawa-sam also interviewed each of us at various stages along the way. And he gathered all of this qualitative data and came up with his findings. And as I mentioned, he had many very interesting findings, but I want to mention 4. He found that the mindfulness and meditation practices allowed these leaders to have a greater capacity for understanding. It allowed them to get in a space where they could clear away all of the distractions, all of the hustle and bustle of daily activities and demands on their time, and think about what's really most important. What's really most important for their own life, their own contribution, and what's important for the people and the communities around them. I just want to mention that prior to starting the Center for Values-Driven Leadership, as an example of this idea of a greater capacity for understanding, I had the privilege of going through a similar mindfulness and meditation practice at Benedictine University. Benedictine University is a Catholic university, and so we have monks there too, Catholic monks. And at a certain stage in my career, when I was about 50 years old, I felt like, it's time for something next. I don't know what it is. And so I went through a process, about 6 months, of regular meditation and mindfulness and meeting with the monks and going on silent retreats to ask the question, what's next? What contribution can I make for the next 10 years of my career? And it was through that process that it became clear to me that starting the Center for Values-Driven Leadership, starting the PhD program, starting master's programs, starting undergrad programs, and so on, is the contribution that I could make for the next 10 years. Now, it's turned into more than 10 years, but I just wanted to share that example of an increased capacity for understanding. Those mindfulness and meditation practices allowed me to sort of block out and push out all of the distractions and ask myself the question, what is most important and how can I contribute to the common good? The second finding that Gamini had is that the mindfulness and meditation practices allow people to gain a deeper sense of one's own purpose and one's own values. It helps people answer the question, who do I want to be as a leader, and how do I want to contribute to the betterment of my family, to the betterment of my community, to the betterment of my country, and to the betterment of the world. So the first idea was that it allows for a deeper capacity for understanding. Point number two, a deeper sense of one's own purpose and values. I want to share an example of one of the executives. This is a guy who is the CEO of a healthcare system, hospitals and clinics and so on, in a rural community in Illinois in the United States. Healthcare in rural communities, as you may know here in Sri Lanka, is very difficult because the populations are smaller. If you have healthcare in the city of Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Colombo, there are lots of people and lots of need for medical services. In more rural communities, there's less demand. It's also harder to get doctors to move to the rural communities because they want to be in the big cities where all the action is. But this guy, Dave Schreiner, he had built a very successful healthcare system in a small rural community in Illinois. And he went through this mindfulness and meditation practice as part of Gamini's dissertation. And he got very clear on his own purpose and his own values. And what he discovered in that process is that he felt called to stay in that community and help build that healthcare system because the people in that area needed it. And he has helped it expand, he has helped allowed it to be profitable, and he is constantly being recruited by larger healthcare systems in major metropolitan areas, but through his mindfulness and meditation processes, he has said, no, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to build this, I'm going to make this succeed, and I'm going to have it contribute to and benefit our community. So point number two, the mindfulness and meditation allows for a deeper sense of one's own understanding of one's own purpose and values. Number three, a deeper capacity for empathy or love or care for other people. It's understanding the needs and aspirations of other people and trying to help them accomplish those aspirations. Another example from Dr. Hewawasam's research is a woman who was the chief financial officer for a manufacturing organization. They made pumps for pumping all kinds of different things, oil, beer, water, you name it. They had highly technical pumps and very basic pumps, and they exported them all over the world. And she was the chief financial officer, and she was very successful at it. But what she saw in her company was that many of the people who worked in the production facilities, the welders, the machine operators, the repair persons, did not gain much of an education in the company. And so through this mindfulness and meditation practices, her practices, she felt that it was her job, that what she wanted to do was to move out of the chief financial officer role, hand that over to the person who reported to her, and take over the Chief Human Resource Officer. And since that time, she has built an entire university for this company that trains people, upskills people, helps people gain additional education, helps people even start their own businesses if they want to leave the company, to really develop the human capacity and the human potential in the community that surrounds that business. So point number 3, those mindfulness and meditation practices allow for a deeper capacity for empathy, love, care for the community and the people around you. And then the 4th one is that those mindfulness and meditation practices stimulate positive behavioral change. They allow executives not to just focus on making money only, or gaining power only, or gaining fame only, but also to act in a way that contributes again to the community and the well-being of the world around them. And I just want to use Dr. Hirwawasam's research center in Mihintala, where he wants to bring people from around the world to do research on the impact of mindfulness and meditation on leadership and on positive social change. Dr. Hirwawasam has 3 businesses that he runs and additional ones that he's developing, and he could have done that just to benefit himself. But it's through those mindfulness and meditation practices as well that you see that desire to contribute to the greater good. So, along with Dr. Hirwawasam, all of your leaders here at the university, your fellow students, and your friends and family, and along with Beverly and me, I would like to invite you to use those mindfulness and meditation practices to elevate your own leadership, to contribute in every way you can to dedicate your life, your skills as engineers, your skills as analysts, your skills that you bring to benefit your families, your communities, your society, this nation of Sri Lanka, and the global good. The link to appreciative inquiry. An appreciative inquiry is a process that helps to stimulate positive change by focusing on strengths. And I just want to give one tip from appreciative inquiry that I hope you remember today and that you can incorporate into your leadership. And before doing that, I just want to ask a question. How many of you talk to yourself? I see a few hands, a few brave souls who are willing to admit it. When you're waking up in the morning, you start talking about what you're going to do that day, where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. Maybe when you're taking your shower in the morning or at night, you're thinking, how did my day go? How is my day going to go? When you're driving in your car, when you're sitting on the bus, whatever, you're constantly talking to yourself. You've got these tapes running in your head. Well, families and communities and organizations are the same way. We've constantly got a pattern of dialogue going. I mean, think about it. How many of you have ever had a colleague who is always negative and who is always complaining and who is always finding the problems? Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because we have all had colleagues like that. I am sure of it. And I just want you to reflect for a moment. What is the impact that that has on you? What does that make you want to do? I know that when I have a colleague who's always negative and finding the problems and complaining, I want to get as far away from that person as possible because it is a negative toxin. I also want to seek out others who can build me up, who can help me accomplish what I want to accomplish. I don't want to be dragged down by that person. It causes me to distance from that person. But then flip that question. How many of you have ever had a colleague who looked for the best in you, who saw your strengths, who saw your capacities, who maybe even saw things in you that you don't see in yourself, who had confidence in you, who gave you an opportunity, who encouraged you? And again, the question is, how does that colleague make you feel? That colleague makes you feel great. That colleague gives you joy, gives you happiness, makes you feel connected, makes you want to work with them, makes you want to collaborate with them, makes you want to change the world with them. And that's the basis of appreciative inquiry as it relates to leadership. Appreciative inquiry is all about continuously focusing on, looking for, and building on strengths. Your strengths and my strengths, and combining those strengths to make a positive impact. And there's really good research out there in the field of psychology. A colleague of ours who taught in the doctoral program that Dr. Hewawa-san was in the values-driven leadership, her name is Barbara Fredrickson. She is a professor at the University of North Carolina. She does research on positive emotions, and she does a lot of brain imaging research to see what the brain does when we're in a state of negative emotions and what the brain does when we're in a state of positive emotions. And through her research, one of the biggest conclusions that she has come to is that for individuals and organizations, in order to be healthy and high performing, achieving and succeeding at what we want to do in life and at work, we need at least a 5-to-1 positive to negative dialogue ratio. A 5-to-1 positive to negative dialogue ratio. What does that mean? That means that for every problem or deficit or deficiency that we talk about, think about, apply to ourselves or apply to others, we apply at least 5 positive inquiries into strengths. When we're at our best, what does that look like? When you are at your best, what does that look like? What are the gifts, the talents, the capacities that you bring to the situation? We need at least a 5-to-1 positive to negative dialogue ratio. Because think of the example of the negative colleague. If you have a person who is sometimes positive, sometimes negative, it tends to drag you down and it tends to distance you from them. Whereas if you have someone who is predominantly encouraging, looking for your strengths, finding your strengths, bringing their own strengths, combining those strengths with your strengths, that lifts you up, that makes you stronger, that inspires, that gives you joy, and it gives you possibility. So think about that as you are leading and as you are working and you are living in your families and communities, to bring at least a 5-to-1 positive to negative dialogue ratio into every interaction and every conversation you have, both with yourself and with others. The last thing I want to say is that specifically one way to do that, and this is the basis of appreciative inquiry, is to ask positive questions. And there are 3 questions that I would recommend in any situation, anywhere, that will elevate your leadership and lead to your flourishing and success in life and in work. The first one, in any situation, ask yourself the question, when I or when we have been at our best, what made that possible? If you happen to be a student, ask yourself the question, when I have been at my best as a student, what made that possible? What were the things that I did Who were the people I surrounded myself with? How did I interact with others? How did I interact with my professors? How did I interact with my family? What allowed me to be at my best as a student? It's also true as an engineer, also true as a wife or a husband or a son or a daughter or a brother or a sister or anywhere you find yourself when I have been at my best. And also at the collective level, if you're working in a team, when we as a team have been at our best at solving a client's problems or creating a new technological innovation or whatever the case may be, when we have been at our best, what made that possible? What did you do? What did I do? What did others do? What resources did we bring in? What relationships did we build? How did we sell our ideas? Whatever the questions might be, ask when I or we have been at our best, what made that possible? That's question number one. And then building on that, question number two is, based on the best of the past, what is the ideal image of the future that I hold or that we hold for where we want to go and what we want to accomplish? And allow yourself to dream and to dream big, because there's a third question that'll allow you to get more practical. But in that second question, ask yourself a question like, imagine it's 5 years from now, or it's 3 years from now, or it's 10 years from now, and I have accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish, or we have accomplished everything we wanted to accomplish. What does that look like? Who's there? What are we doing? What's going on? What's the impact we're having? And imagine it in full, vivid, living color. And the reason for that is the research shows that we as human beings, what determines our behavior is our most powerful, positive, guiding images of the future. So if we can discover and understand our strengths, and we can use them to then craft an image of the future that is compelling, that we really want to go there together, and it will mobilize resources, energy for us to get there. And then the third question is the practical one. What are the 3 most important steps we can take right now to get us to that guiding image of the future, to get us to that future that we most want? And so I just want to go back to the idea of how to bring appreciative inquiry into leadership. Try to bring a 5-to-1 positive to negative dialogue ratio everywhere you go, personally in the shower and at work and with your families and in your communities. And one way to do that is to ask those positive questions. When we're at our best, what's going on? What are your strengths, mine? Where do we want to go? And what are the specific steps we can take to get there? So that's all I have to share today. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that the practices of meditation and mindfulness and appreciative inquiry will help you on your journey of values-driven leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jim. That was a very insightful and very interesting lecture you gave us, especially on how mindfulness affects a human being physically and how it shapes the future of that particular human being. I also believe that if we take a human being, everyone will face negative emotions, especially anxiety, sadness, shame, the fear of being rejected from the public, from your colleagues. But having a proper mindset and being mindful about your surrounding, about yourself, most importantly, will actually make you achieve your target goals and also help you be a better human at the end of the day. So thank you once again, Dr. Jim, for that insightful knowledge that you shared with us. Next, I would like to move forward and introduce our next guest speaker this evening, Dr. Gamini Hevavasan. Sir, the podium is all yours.
until he start the setup, I have a PowerPoint, so he will just display over here. First of all, අපි හාමුදුරුවන්ගෙන් අවසරයි බොහොම ස්තුතියි මෙතෙන්ට ආවට. So I closely associate with this Buddhist monk, and he's the lecturer from Kelaniya University. I consider myself being with him, he's my library. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with me all the time. So this is the asset that I'm using. Even I live in United States, I frequently communicate with him. The reason why I'm doing is because I need sources. I need to make sure that I'm practical. And so he helped me throughout my life, especially for my own personal life, and also my business life, and also my academia life. So the reason is he directing me with the correct resources. So this is unbelievable. I hope this might be a good example for the students of this university. When you do your papers, when you do your researches, having a library next to you, not the library so-called we are in, but a library like him, that is very important. Thank you. And again, I really would like to say thank you to Dr. Ludema. This is one of the dreams that I had after going through your program, and I talked to myself, well, how could I tell my other colleague in Sri Lanka the quality of the program that I went through and the knowledge that I am gaining from you? How do I share with my other colleagues? So I think I got the privilege today to show my brothers and sisters in this country the value of values-driven leadership and what we can learn. So going through that program, most of the stuff that I pay attention to was Buddha's teaching. Well, again, the audience is Sri Lanka, so I would like to say this. I did my primary education in Sri Lanka, and I moved to US to do my undergrad, grad, and the PhD. As all of you, or most of you, I also went to the Sunday school, Dampasal, and also I learned Buddhism as a language until from grade 1 to grade 10, and I did all those exams. I think I got good grades for those. But unfortunately, what I went through, learning Buddha's teaching, I was trapped into the bucket of religion. So unfortunately, I couldn't understand what exactly it is because I did the mistake by myself not putting those into practice. And I could memorize many things. As all of you know, I could memorize things in Pali that I know for sure you do too. So Dr. Ludema said one of the professor or scholar, Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, who came this 5-to-1 theory. You know what she did? She understood, she studied Karaniyametta Sutra. And I would like to challenge all these universities in Sri Lanka. Any of these professors or any of these students from these universities has studied Karaniyametta Sutra and came up with a theory or are in the global leadership level or what we have done. Because it happened to me. I was so blind until I get into the program like values-driven leadership. So there are a lot, and unfortunately, Dr. Ludema helped me to open my eyes. You can go ahead. And helped me to understand how do you make these values into practice. Not only that, how you can develop yourself, talking to yourself, understanding yourself. So then I try to connect his teaching with the Buddha's teaching and see how I can make it to practical situation. So I studied the subject of mindfulness and its applications to the leadership. So I'm not a scholar, and it was so tough for me at the beginning to become, do the works that he asked me to follow. Because in profession I'm a businessman, I'm do many business in my life, not only one. So I have a responsibility working in US hours, and also I have a responsibility working in Sri Lanka in Sri Lankan hours. So those things, what I did, I always took as, I see the happiness within myself, that because of the teaching of Buddhas, because I put that into practical situation with his guidance. That's what it was. So now, he explained to you about my findings. That was amazing, and I think I would like to share a bit about that with you, because the reason that I really would like to touch these things are, not like any other country, Sri Lanka has this beautiful teaching. We do not need to depend on anyone. I'm so proud to say, we do not need to depend on IMF or a World Bank. What we really need to depend on is this practical teaching. If you can put this practical teaching to yourself, I don't think that you need to go anywhere else. You don't need to leave this country. It is so sad, and I can cry days and days looking into this, our current society, because I have a business in Biagama. We have more than 100 people working. There's an engineering company. We are facing a problem not having skillful people to work for us. Now you heard from Dr. Ludema, one of the participants who participated in the studies, the CEO from the hospital group, right? After going through this mindfulness training, what he decided was to stay where he is and help the community and create a change and giving back to the community and earning the happiness through that. And that happiness we cannot earn from anywhere else. What we hear today in this society is everyone is encouraging other person to leave the country, saying that there is no future in this country, which is very sad. What we can do is, as he pointed out, this is the time for us to talk to ourselves. If we are ready to talk to ourselves and see the side that we have not seen ourselves, I think that is what we need, not someone else's money. If we can talk to ourselves and find out the side that we have not seen so far from ourselves, I think that might be the most gift that someone can earn. Then that, with the society, I think we can change it, and that is what we really need. So, I treat as the magic pill of mindfulness for leadership. So why I'm saying this is, in this graph, you will see, when we are in the 1980s, nobody talked about mindfulness. No, there was no major journals or publications talking about mindfulness. Throughout these years, in 2020, you know the popularity of mindfulness around the world. But my question to Sri Lankan is, do you really know this? If you do, what we have done? Well, 2008, 44% of companies, the Fortune 100 companies and Fortune 500 companies, they had mindfulness department. And this is how it gradually increased. And the earnings through this, if you're taking this as a business itself for the business idea, you know how much earning you can go through the dates. So currently, after the COVID situation, these numbers, I think it's either double or triple or more than that. You have a bigger multiplication of that. So this is mostly what the West is taking these original teaching of mindfulness and apply to their business and daily life. So what happened to me, and I told you, I went to the Sunday school, I studied the Buddhism as a religion from grade 1 to grade 10, but I never knew what the true mindfulness means until I finished this program or start doing my research. If you take the mindfulness, the word coming from Satipatthana. In 1882, one of the British scholars visited Sri Lanka called Rice Davis, and he studies Buddhist teaching from our monks. Then he gave the word Satipatthana, he named it as mindfulness. From that day on, this happened on 1882. From that day onwards until today, we take Satipatthana as the mindfulness.
But if you pay closer attention, what does satipatthana means? It comes with 3 words: sati, upa, and thana. When you say sati, it equals to awareness, attention, and diligence and vigilance. And upa means inside, and thana means to place. So if you take these 3 words into one, satipatthana is to place the attention inside. So the closest English word that I think which goes with current mindfulness is introspection. That's where we need to pay attention to ourselves rather than getting disturbed by the outside stimuli, what we can bring, how our actions goes. That's what this Satipatthana is. That is what that Satipatthana Sutra talks about. So we have a witness right here. If you have any question about the Satipatthana Sutra, you can check with him and get more guidelines. So, this is one of the very important slides. As Buddha explained, the body and the mind are not 2 different entities, but it is a psychosomatic existence of activities. Even though we can see the body as an entity, the rapidity of the mind is quite immeasurable. That is why it is called the fastest activity in the world. The Buddha once said, even giving a simile to show the rapidity of this mind is quite impossible. Well, now I would like you to bring an example of the human organism. Think about a human organism. As humans, our body is functioning as a machine filled with different activities. These activities are a product from the reaction to our senses, being stimulated by the environment. Specifically, the activity of hearing happens when our ear perception is stimulated by a sound from the environment. When we hear something, it provokes a reaction in our body. As per Buddha's teaching, the task of the mind is understanding this reaction. To pinpoint this reaction, we must analyze the brain, which has 2 main activities. One is to the cerebral cortex, which pertain to our thinking. The other is the limbic system, which pertain to our emotion. When the Buddha spoke about the mind, he referred to 3 parts: vijnana, which is the perception aspect of the mind, and the mano, which is the intellectual aspect of the mind, and the chitta, emotional aspect of the mind. Perceptions refer to our 6 senses: eye perception, ear perception, nose perceptions, tongue perceptions, body perceptions, and mind perception. After perceptions comes the thinking part or the intellect. We have a wisdom as innate quality because we have intellectual part of mind within us. The Buddha called this mano, while you all know Sigmund Freud called it ego. For example, when we get angry, it begins with one of our senses intaking something unpleasant. This is the perceptual part. Then our body interprets the sensory input as a feeling of anger towards the unpleasant factor. This is the intellectual part. Finally, this message is taken to our adrenal gland, where adrenal hormones are released and thus produce the feeling of anger. This is the emotional part. Buddha referred to this emotional arousal as chitta, and the Sigmund Freud called it id. In this example, if the feeling of anger is not released, tension will remain in the body. We call the tension stress. To remove stress, we must practice conscious relaxation or satipatthana or so-called mindfulness. Conscious relaxation promotes awareness of what is happening in the body and using that awareness to control any feelings that may arise. So this is what Jim went through explaining the research that I conducted. So I'm so proud to say that I have 22 active participants on this research study. These people are world leaders like CEO of the big companies, CFO, or the upper management. So I collected the data. In order for me to collect the data, these are the 4 monks that he explained earlier. One of Bhante Gunaratana, who is 96 years old. He's in Washington, D.C. And he came to teach us. He came to teach this group. Another one is Bhante Silananda. He's in Washington, D.C. too, but currently he's in Sri Lanka. Then I had the privilege of inviting 2 Caucasian monks, Bhante Rahula, who has been in Sri Lanka a long time ago, and now he's resident in USA. And then the young monk, he's in his late 30s, called Bhante J. So those 4 monks came throughout that period and taught us what this mindfulness is without bringing any religious aspect into that. None of these monks talk about any religious activities. What they did talk and what they asked us to train was the practice of original mindfulness. It was amazing to see because our audience, there were no Buddhist people. They came from different faiths, different religions. Without disturbing that, these teachings will allow us to go deep into a person and help them to understand who they are. That is what this proper introspection is. Going through that process, they understood, oh wow, this is the side that I have not seen within myself, how I can be more productive, how I can do best what I am doing. So these are the 4 dimensions that Jim talked about earlier. So I did the action research methodology because one thing in US and that system, anyone can say anything, but to prove we have to do a research. And most of the stuff has to be done under laboratory. And we have to have the data. We need to go back and fight with the data. And that is what we do back in US, and that's why we publish those wonderful journals every day. So that is something that this country and this university also can learn, how we can bring these wonderful teaching, what we hear every day, into practice, how we can bring this to a world population. This is what we need the research to be done. And that's what Dr. Barbara Fredrickson did, so-called loving friendliness, the sutra that everyone knows, Karaniyametta Sutra. So she paid high attention to that without even knowing those Pali scripts. But we know that what we do not use it for our own benefits. So, going back to my results, I was able to connect those results with what is this true mindfulness or where it's coming from. Actually, we all know Aryashtangaka Marga or Eightfold Path, so-called, or Supernormal Eightfold Way. Get into the mindfulness, which is the 7th step of the 8-step process. We need to start from step 1, which is, in Pali we call it Sammaditthi. I would like to translate as Bhante Punnaji says, harmonious perspective. If we can start with harmonious perspective, looking into 360 degrees and understanding different views before make our own judgment, that's how we need to train ourselves first. Then we can move forward one by one to the number 7th, which is the mindfulness. So again, I knew mindfulness or the Samma Sati is the 7th step of the 8-step process, but I didn't go through that or didn't practice it, didn't even care because it was like something I used to hear from age 2, 3. And I never knew what it is. But when I became a leader and leading stuff in US and Colombo, and I really wanted to know how do I develop myself. And going through this process, 1, 2, 3, starting from harmonious perspective, it helps me a lot. It does. So I would like to invite you to just try it. Just do it. Because we are so good with memory. We are so good in memory. It's very powerful, our memory. That's why all of you are in this university too, because this is one of the biggest university and the hardest university to enter. But in memory, yes, we all are. But now it's time for us to think, how do I put this into practical? How do I create this relationship? Does it make sense to myself? So, what does this true mindfulness is? Well, I know I'm not the right one to tell you. The Hamudru is right here. But what I understood is, starting from our body, which is in Pali we say Kaya Nupassana, and then gradually go through the process itself. And then only before we make any action, how we can take that action, including if you are going to get angry, your body, what is the reaction within your body you feel when you get angry? What thoughts it come to your mind? So what action how you are going to release your anger? So that's what we really needed to understand. Now, we know the word vichikicha. Actually, in English, it's called cognitive dissonance, which it was introduced to us by Leon Festinger. Cognitive dissonance is when your emotion and intellect part is not in balance. They fight with each other and we get the insecurity or the stress. So, this 8-step process, if we train ourselves to go through on this 8-step process, the 8th one we know is samadhi, which is the equilibrium, or we're trying to bring the cognitive consonance. Cognitive consonance is you bring your emotion and intellect part into a level that you are free to make a profitable and good decision in whatever you do. I do not want to go into the religion aspect of these explanations. What I really would like to tell you is, as a human being, as a leader, how do I utilize these in order to run my own business? Through that, I become a good citizen, I believe. I become a good husband, that I believe. I am a good father, that I trust. Because going through process, it is more practical. So, I would like to invite these young fellows. Just pay attention to what you already know. As Jim said that we needed to have a good friend, and he explained about a good friend and a positive friend and a negative friend. See whether you have one who can talk about this and bring the application into practice. That is what it is very important, because I'm doing it and it is working with me very well. Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you, Dr. Gamini Hevasam, for that insightful speech, especially on how the mindfulness affects human body in its biological aspect. So Dr. Jim talked about how mindfulness affects in the long run, and you specifically talked about how it shapes the human brain into thinking in a more positive manner. So thank you for that knowledgeable insight. Next, we have probably come to the most awaited moment of the evening. We'll be having the open forum, the Q&A session with Dr. Jim, Dr. Gamini, and also Dr. Beverly, and also Professor Ajit will be accompanying us on the table. So first of all, I would like to invite Dr. Jim forward, and also Dr. Gamini, Dr. Beverly, and also Professor Ajit De Silva. I'm sorry, Dr. Inoka will be accompanying us on the judgment.
So you can raise
joined the PhD program, the values-driven leadership program. Not my main intention was, wow, I have this much of business, now I want to get a PhD and earn big bucks. Without knowing what actually the value was, that's what my motivation was to enter into the program and earn the PhD. But throughout the PhD, it changed me upside down. And then I really value something called intellectual happiness. So that integrating or gaining the intellectual happiness, what I do, then I become best of it. So that is what I apply for the leadership. So then knowing this, the value of this teaching and being more practical with the teaching and applying to what I do, then I thought, okay, here is the reason for mindfulness and leadership. I am gaining experience, it is happening with me and it is beneficial for myself, so I wanted to share with someone else. That's why this teaching and this learning direct me to combine mindfulness and the leadership.
Basically, although you started at the beginning, that you knew that mindfulness is something that you can tap.
I knew, but I never practiced that,
Yes.
and I didn't knew the value of it until I joined the values-driven leadership to understand what actually values are. That helps me to go back and study what I learned more easily.
And actually, that's what happens when you say that active research.
Yes.
So the researcher changes first, and then through your writing,
Very correct.
make the change in others.
Very
It's
correct.
really good.
Yes. Jim, you have a question?
I think your point about how research changes the researcher is a very good one. And sort of two principles that we always held in the PhD program in values-driven leadership are, number one, choose a topic that you are passionate about. Because a dissertation can be a very long, difficult, and lonely process. And if you don't have some energy, some passion, some excitement around a topic, it can be a long, lonely ride. And so one of the things I kept telling Gamini, or Dr. Hiwawasam, is I said, what do you really want to study? What is really in your heart? What is really your deep passion? And I think that helped to move in that direction.
It did.
The other thing is that one of the principles that we've always had about research in the Center for Values-Driven Leadership is that research should, at the end of the day, be practical, at least in a program like our program. Remember, I said that all of our students were executives, maybe in their 40s, 50s, occasionally we had a student in their 30s. And they ran businesses, they ran organizations, and so they needed their research to be practical. And that's why Gamini, I said, Gamini, do an action research project where you'll study something and use what you learn to actually change something, to make a difference, to have an impact. And that's the methodology he used. And in a dissertation, I don't know if it's the same here, but typically you write 5 chapters, an introduction, a literature review, a methodology section, your results section, and then your 5th chapter, which is sort of your new theoretical contribution. Well, Gamini did all of that, and I said, Gamini, this is an action research project. It needs to make a difference in the world. You need to write chapter 6. And Gamini said, no, please. Not a chapter 6. But that's when he said, okay, let's start a research center in Sri Lanka where we can begin to explore this connection between mindfulness and excellent leadership at a more deep level. And so I just wanted to share that because for me, Dr. Hiwawasam's dissertation process is an example of the kind of activist scholarship that really helps to make a positive difference in the world.
Yeah, that is really important because
in distress for a variety of different reasons. And yes, I do believe that mindfulness can change most people. Not all people can do the kind of introspection that Damini is talking about and that mindfulness requires. And certainly, serenity is necessary to begin the process. And so helping someone stabilize or calm down, quiet their mind enough to be able to look within is a big part of any process starting off with in therapy. My favorite type of therapy that I do is working with couples and with families. And one of the main problems couples and families have is being able to express what they feel and think to another person in a way that that person can understand. And that is a mindfulness process. That is a process that requires looking within without judgment, paying close attention. And I support them in finding words for what they're feeling and thinking, and then helping to manage the intensity of those feelings, right, and express those in a way that their partner or person in their family can understand. It's unbelievable the difference that that makes in people's lives and in people's relationships. This is a type of leadership on a smaller scale, but a scale that impacts all of us. It impacts all of humanity. So it's hard to state really how it's been really to express it. For me, for us, the two of us together, and then for me in my work. It's something that's become a lifestyle. Thank you for asking.
Well, it's really important now because you have to live your life within the short time period. So we begin and we need to remember that we are going away. So within that short time period, we have to live our life rather than as you said, you're CEO of a company and you are leading other people. Yes, that is going beyond leading oneself. And first thing is leading oneself. So when it comes to psychology and like understanding oneself and then knowing how if I can change myself in a positive manner so that I can become the positive person that you say. So that is really important, and I think we are together doing a marvelous job with that. So yes, and yes, we are waiting for your ideas actually. So we are just having this conversation until an idea comes out from you. Yes, Dr. A.R.
Right, so question, I think a common question to all of us, that we are day-to-day basis, daily basis, entangled with our daily routines, in the job as well as in the family course, and be mindful, because rather than we are internally driven, we are externally driven. We are scheduled to do something. So how to break this inertia, start being mindful or start practicing any kind of meditation. So what was, I have second question after you answer. So I will let you ask how to break this inertia of daily. We are rolling on, we cannot stop. Externally driven.
Well, I only can speak about myself, and I do business in the US and Toronto. I consider myself as a 24/7. I know the body needs time to relax, and I pay attention to those. No question on that. I have a family, I have 3 kids too, and I have a bigger payroll to look after, and that is the most stress thing. And under these circumstances, and I actually have 2 payrolls, one in US and one in Colorado. I do get what you're saying, because we have been trained, or we have been caged actually to follow the same routine again and again and again. So that I follow Dr. Dudema's guideline. Don't
Talk to yourself in the morning and see what is your route. Is this what you really wanted to do? Because that's what I do. And I try to break that cage and get out of it and see the bigger picture. Whenever I see the big, as he explained earlier, okay, in 5 years, where you really wanted to be. So I don't think when we cage, we can do that. We cannot do it because yes, we have scheduled things. I need to drop my kids to the classroom, I have to go to the lecture, I have to teach the students, I have to go shopping, go out with my wife, everything comes. I do respect those too, but at the same time, I always wanted to see the side that I have not seen within myself. Whenever I try to do that, then I break the barriers and then I get out. I find the time to do that because I know that is what is necessary for myself in order to help other people, in order to help myself. So I talk to myself so that what I do is to break this cage thing is talk to myself and see, oh, this is where I wanted to be and these are the actions I'm going to do because routing things that I keep doing for years and years, I got stuck in one place. This is where you wanted to get stuck? No. For me, this is not the place I really wanted to get stuck. I always see myself a little further and I drive into that. Jim, you have anything to add?
We have in this room experts on mindfulness that know way more than I know. But Bhante Ruhula was very helpful for me when we went through these workshops. And one of the things, I can really relate to what you're saying about being chained to the clock and having many demands from other people that sort of determine what we do. And yet I have found in my own life that I am most productive and have the greatest impact when I daily take time to meditate in the morning. And that's just me. Everybody else has a different practice. 15 minutes for me to meditate. And when I was speaking earlier, I talked about one of Gamini's findings about a deeper sense of understanding. That's what those meditation practices do for me. They stop the world. And they allow me to get in a space where I can listen and where I can hear and where I can focus on what's most important and push aside all of the noise and all of the distractions that are getting in my way of the most important things. And I notice that when I am in a regular routine of that kind of meditation on a daily basis, that's when I am the most productive and most focused and most able to accomplish my goals. When I get out of that, then I become very distracted. The other thing Bhante Ruhula taught us was the M&M, the minute meditation. And that's something that I practice on a regular basis. One example, I have a colleague in senior administration at the university that drives me crazy sometimes. He and I just have very different approaches and personalities. So when it's time for me to go to a meeting with him, I typically go in with anxiety, I go in with anger, I go in with all kinds of emotions. So if I can take an M&M, minute meditation where I can stop and do some deep breathing, or another one that I like for some reason I don't know, is rubbing the pointer finger and the thumb together for a couple of minutes, and to think about what is it that he really wants, how can I help him accomplish his goals, what are the strengths that I see in him that I can connect with, and how can I try to join him in accomplishing something together. That 1 minute or 2 minutes of that kind of meditation in the middle of the day or mindfulness practice is very helpful to me. I don't know if those will be helpful to you, but those are just a couple of very small practical things that I try to implement in my life. Beverly?
So a lot of times when 15 minutes might sound kind of long when people are first starting this sort of practice. And so starting with a shorter time, I think can really help, and then slowly extend it to a longer period of time. So starting with 1 minute, of course, and to set a gentle timer on your phone so that you can gently come out of it, and then add the it's so challenging to sit for that long when you have so much on your mind. And to just keep releasing and coming back, releasing whatever it is your mind is thinking about, and coming back to focusing on breath, or focusing on breathing, on a particular word or a particular image, to help bring you back to calm and release whatever your mind is going. So those are some good practical tips just for getting started. I'm sure here with so many experts in Sri Lanka, you'll find many more, but that's a good way to start.
And a little bit on this Eminem, why is it called?
We have a candy called M&M, everybody knows
Ah,
that.
yes, that one. Right.
And
So,
then that means minute
Minute
meditation.
minute meditation.
Yeah.
So to add to that minute meditation, so as you said, like here and there throughout the day, so when you want to catch your thoughts, because your thoughts are going all over the place and sometimes you can focus on things that you have on your mind. So there are such situations even normally. So what I do is just to bring my attention to my feet, bottom of the feet, so that I can sense the slipper. And also sometimes I remove the slippers and just sense the coldness of the floor so that I can sense it. And that is only a few seconds, but that brings me to the moment. Otherwise I would be like thinking about picking the keys and then filling up some forms, preparing the lecture notes or doing the lecture and all of that. So things will be jumping into my mind. So what to cook for the dinner even. So all these things are coming into me. So I cannot focus on one thing. So sometimes I need to do that. Usually I do that, bring my attention to my feet. So even for you all, if you want, you can try those things, because when you are bringing your attention to something on the senses, 5 senses, like Chakshuda, Gana, Jiva, Kai, and the Manan as well. So it is easy to come to the present moment, because you can think about the past senses, like when you were sleeping in the bed, it was like this. Likewise, you can think about the past, but rather than right now, what do you sense? So you can bring your attention to right now, what you sense, and then for that moment of second, your mind is here in the present moment. So then time to time, not all the time, so you would be staying there, and your mind will tell you actually, because we don't need to lengthen the time we are using for the meditation, because mind likes to be cool. So when we give an opportunity for the mind to be cool, it automatically lengthens that time. So you will find when you start practicing like that, as Dr. Jim mentioned, you will automatically lengthen your time, because you enjoy being in meditation than doing other things. So that is a trick, but you can't do it always at home, of course, because there are so many other things, other responsibilities that you have. You have to take the nappies of the baby and all that things. So you wouldn't find time to meditate like that. So in such situations, little half seconds here and there will help you do that. Just 5 to 5 seconds.
Here's another question.
My follow-up question is
Follow-up question. You have another question?
now, the Veda mentioned about visualizing where you should be, or we should be in another 5 years, 10 years time, and what steps that we can take and go there. Now that implies that you are kind of unhappy about your current position and therefore you want to go to a higher state. So shouldn't we be happy about what we are at the moment? And then yeah, we are always ready. If you go another 5 years time, achieve that way, then we are looking for another. Always going in exponential curve. that's one, I think the 5 to 1 positive negative thing. Now, when we go again, then we get so many requests of feel. We feel, then we become kind of negative. We don't just accept and see that there are a lot of opportunities coming. We don't grab. But not grabbing it, is it negative or is it far being positive? Whatever the question, right? Whatever.
That's a really good question. And a whole research project and agenda around that very question in your research center someday. Because it may be that appreciative inquiry and a Buddhist perspective to mindfulness have difference of perspective on that. However, one of the things that's really important in an appreciative inquiry approach or process is the topic that you choose to inquire into. So for example, it may be that I want to be more loving to my wife Beverly. So if that's the topic, how do I become more loving? Then my first step in an appreciative process is to say, when I have been at my best around being loving to Beverly, what does that look like? What have I done? What have I said? How have I acted? How have I lived my life to be able to be loving? And then the next question is, what is that image of the future? How can I be more loving? Building on the times that I have been most loving in the past, how can I be even more loving? And then what are specific steps I need to take there? And so the point I want to make is that the first step of the topic you choose is a very important one. If the topic is, well, how do I become richer, more rich or more powerful or more famous, then yes, I think you fall into that trap of striving, and never being content and so on. If the topic you choose is one of love, of contribution, of giving to others, then it feels better to me. But I don't know if that's in conflict with the Buddhist teaching or not. So thank you for that great question.
Well, I would like to add the happiness. How are we going to define it? If you're going to define using fulfilling our sensual pleasure, yes. This moment we have this much, we want to move forward over there, and then when we become in that, then we have another goal. So that means we are trying to fulfill our sensual pleasure all the time. Now the question is, are these sensual pleasures permanent? We know they are not permanent. We are going behind something, it is not permanent. Is that what the happiness is? For what I consider is the true happiness is how I bring my mind into calm level, or to create a calm mind. When my mind is calm, I have a relaxed body. So that is how I see happiness in my life. If I go in behind the sensual pleasure, then I'm going to get into that trap. Well, is that what the happiness I'm looking for? Because as soon as I reach something, I need more and more and more. That's the human behavior. And then we know that is not permanent. I'm not saying that you are not going to gain your goals. You need to reach out to goal. But in my situation, I understand that. I understand the impermanence of those goals, impermanence of sensual pleasure. Can you add something from the point of psychology into that?
Yeah, I mean, what is my contribution is a different question, right, than what is going to satisfy myself personally. What we know about happiness from research is that it's not achieved through financial gain and fame and fortune. We know if human beings do not have enough to survive and meet basic needs, there's a lot of stress. This is very difficult.
But once we've achieved enough to meet our basic needs, making more money does not make us any happier. In fact, it tends to make us less happy over time. So finding our way to sustain ourselves then allows us to ask that question of what I can contribute. What's next? And because of impermanence, because life and our situation, our environment, our physical bodies, they're changing constantly, we need to adapt to those changes. What is next? How do I contribute now, in this situation, and in this moment, in this context, looking at what I'm good at? And that's sometimes hard to figure out, looking at the opportunities around me. Sometimes there are many, and it's hard to choose, right? But these are the things that we can consider. What is my contribution? We know from research, those that, just as Gamini's research showed, that kind of purpose is what brings greater sense of fulfillment and happiness in life.
Thank you for that golden question, JR. Yes, and actually, when it comes, yes, there is another question.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, yes, the participants of my research was high-end, so-called high-end, but what effect I gave following the same mechanism in the regular people, that's we could do at the research center too, as a first stage. I need the support from Moratua University to do that. If Moratua can support, we can even start it tomorrow.
You have Dr. J.R. Gamage and Dr. Mahesh Hordagode for that, including myself from Mechanical Engineering Department, and of course Professor Gopura is also there. And yes, some more questions, please.
May I just
Yes.
follow up on this? One of the things that was very striking to me in running the Center for Values-Driven Leadership, running the doctoral program with all of these very senior leaders, consulting with a lot of organizations at the senior level, is that how much those people need this. More even so than people perhaps at lower levels or earlier in their careers and so on. We all need it. But many of those folks that were in your study, that were in our doctoral program, that we have worked with over the years, they have, not all of them, but some of them have done a lot of damage to their own life and to the lives of their spouses and their children and the people around them because they're striving so hard for success and wealth and power and so forth. And so they actually, I believe, in many cases, not all cases, I don't want to overgeneralize, but there is a thirst, there is a hunger, there is a desire and a need for introspection, for mindfulness, for understanding life from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And most of them, I think, again, as I said, there were only two Buddhist background participants were there, and all others are different faith ground. But this practice of mindfulness or satipatthana introduced to them without any religion notation, no religion aspect has introduced to them. This is only the teaching, basically going through the psychological method of these process and how to do it. So then audience likes that. They welcome because there is no religion attachment into that. I think as a Sri Lankan, the biggest mistake, what happened to myself, well, I only can talk about myself, what happened to myself with this wonderful teaching, I went through that religious aspect of it. So as soon as you break that and then you become open and you are trying to start thinking about that sammaditthi or harmonious perspective, then you are grabbing those information in a different point rather than you used to do it. That's what it happened to me. Through the research also, I experienced that. And as you said, I asked all of my participants to keep a journal. They wrote down their changes within themselves on that journal. That was not an easy thing. He is the one who asked me to follow a journal for 12 weeks, 22 participants. They keep writing every day. So coding them was not that easy at all. But looking at those responses, the way that they have changed themselves, so they knew at that point they have gone in a totally different direction, and that disturbed them, that destroyed them. And then later on, at the end part of the research, the response was, oh, I'm so good at that meeting. My results is so good. I remember one quote saying, well, my colleague asked me, did I get married? Because the happiness that particular person shows in front of it was very recognizable. And they said, those are the things that happen to the participants. So when you, the other beauty thing over here is, I think Hamaduru can talk to us on this, how practical it is. The question that the Sri Lanka has, do we really know it is practical? If we do know, do we practice it?
That's the point about it. And Mr. Jayat also has a question.
So this is a discussion I've been having with Gamini over the last 10 days as we've been traveling together. As my understanding of Buddhism from my work as a psychologist, and then his understanding of Buddhism from his work, we've sort of been discussing some of the ways we understand that differently. And one of the things that I was taught about mindfulness is we can cling, but we can also avoid. And actually, one of the things our mind does naturally, just like when your hand gets close to something hot, your reflexes pull your hand away. You don't think about it, it just happens. Our mind does the same thing with difficult things. So as soon as we get close to something that might be kind of hard, our mind just automatically will move away from it. And it takes some paying attention to that before we notice that our mind is avoiding something that is perhaps some necessary suffering for us to endure in order to grow. So when a problem that we keep turning away from, coming back to a little later, that's not a bad strategy, right? But if it keeps not working, then it's time to try something different, right? And there may be some part of that problem that's particularly difficult that another person may be able to help you with. So when it keeps not working, ask for some help, and find someone who you trust to listen to you, who's a good listener, and can maybe help you sort out what part of that maybe you need to suffer a little bit, right? Like, you're a young person, you carry the burden of the future. Figuring out what you're going to do, where you're going to go, this is hard. It stresses out a lot of people. How am I going to build my life? And the world situation is difficult. Sri Lanka's situation is difficult. How am I going to figure this out? So sometimes there's a lot of conflict and suffering that a person has to go through in order to grow. But one of the things we know from psychology is that is better handled with someone else, someone who we really trust. Sometimes it's your parents, sometimes it's a professor who you really care about. Sometimes maybe, to see a therapist, if you can find a therapist to listen to you. But having someone help carry that and offer you compassion and support as you struggle with this conflict can really make things resolve in unexpected ways. So.
Thank you, Jayat, for asking that very important question, because that's what most of the students, and not only students, we also fall into that trap of the loop where we postpone or just forget about it for the time being, and again we have to face it. Yeah. That is something. And then some more questions, please. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Especially Kamini as well. Now Sri Lanka is in a situation where we are really in, and if you want cognitive dissonance, we really like very, very practical situation that we are in for that, right? Stressors and so much to do and all that, we are great response. But going back to a little bit of a question with Japan, after 2 bombs, I mean, you hear that industrial community identify, as you are industrialists as well, that they must do something, and they have this kind of like singular obsession with quality. Maybe as mindfulness, I mean, like you identify this is the way that we must come out of this issue. So, is there a way of changing very quickly our industrial heads or the company heads to not to look at this current way of doing? I mean, we seem to be living in escaping reality rather than really responding the way we should be responding as a nation. Is there a way of using that knowledge, bringing them to reality, grounding them, and not that mitigate down samadhi, right, that we said about it, there must be a way, I suppose. And the question that you said about whether the University of Toronto is ready, I think we would be very much happy to look at this introspective leadership. We were discussing that multidisciplinary, bring the faculty of medicine in as well. Answer is yes, we will proceed with that.
Great, thank you. And well, I think that Sri Lanka, this is a time for Sri Lanka to take the U-turn. I feel it and I do it. I have an engineering company at Biagama. So I'm facing the same problem that you just listed. This is a so-called bankrupt country for some people, but not for me. And yes, the skills are going away. Yes, I do understand. But I have not closed down my factory. What I have right now, overcapacity. So I think Denwan is here who's working with me, he can witness this. So if my company can be over capacity, me being in US, running the company in Sri Lanka, I have a question for other leaders in this country, what they have done. So now I would like to connect the mechanism that I use, especially so-called introspective leadership. Yes, I pay more attention to myself rather than I pay attention to other people. So when I pay more attention to myself, I see things that I have not seen within myself. If other leaders or the company owners in this country who can pay attention to themselves to find out what they have not seen, and when they see what they have not seen, can they apply into this current situation? Because we have labeled as bankrupt, we know we need to change things. As I said earlier, this is the time for us to take the U-turn. Whatever we have been doing for a long time did not work. That is why we place here. As an example, being in this engineering school over here, we were so ashamed to say that even the wheelbarrow we used to get from other countries. Why we did that? I remember reading article and showing things that even the kites itself that our children are flying over here came from China. Why? Who to blame? I blame myself, nobody else. So this is the time that we have to take the U-turn and do something. Especially, I really like to hear that you are very interested about connecting with the introspective leadership. I think this is the time. This is the time to tell our young students how much skills they own. Because I hire people from Moratuwa to my own factory, but they are so good in memory, they are so good in theory, but unfortunately, they are not really good at practical situation. So we are facing that problem right now. Now, I think it's not only me. If you talk to the other industry leaders, they might say the same thing. So in that situation, if we can, before they get graduated, these young minds, if we can introduce how to become more practical, I think that's another way that the country should look into that. And I think I really appreciate, I so love to hear that you would like to bring this introspective leadership into your disciplines. That might give a huge opportunity for Sri Lanka. If it is coming from Moratuwa, other people definitely welcome it. So I think that's the way that we have to think, because practically, I do that in my own organization. As a result, right now, I do have overcapacity of the projects that we are dealing with. So then, if my company has overcapacity of the project, how do I call it a bankrupt country? I am not ready to do that. So it might be individual people might bankrupt because they are going the same path. If you can take a time to think about how do I take this U-turn, I think that's the key here. So if universities agree to that, I will definitely give my fullest support in order to talk to these people, and if anything can change, I'm here. And I know Dr. Dudema will help me because I learned this stuff from him.
That was very eloquent, and I don't have much to add other than to say that the change that you talk about is only going to happen if leaders like you, leaders like the people in this room, leaders like those up here at the front of the room say we want to make that change, and we want to band together with other like-minded people to promote that change and be the change that we want to see here in our nation. We don't have to rely on others outside. We don't have to rely on others' ideas. We can inquire into what do we have here, what are the strengths, capacities, capabilities that we have right here in Sri Lanka, and how can we leverage those to build the future that we want to build. And it's people with courage like you, leaders like you, that are going to make it happen. And it just makes my heart sing to hear you say that's what you want to do here at this university, and to hear Gamini say similar things. And absolutely, we're here in full support.
As Jim and Beverly explained earlier, you have been to like 80 plus countries, and he confirmed that this is one of the best. Why? because they had an opportunity to see the things what even I have not seen earlier. So every time I took them to a places, they said, "Oh wow," and they were so impressed. Why? Even being to other countries, they have seen the golden opportunity what we have right here. And the sad part for me is, of course, they came from far away, understood it. Do we really value that? Do we really know what we have? The day that we realize what we have, I think that's going to be the beautiful day for all of us. Until that, no matter what, no matter how much money we are getting from World Bank or IMF, we will keep still asking money until we change ourselves and understand what we have here.
In that sense, we are sitting on the gold, both physically and psychologically. We have, from the psychological side, we have Buddhism to support us, and the Sangha, as well as in the physically, we have the resources. And yet the people are not ready to mix them together. And that intellectual, yes?
What is ingredient that we need to have? We need to develop as a nation, as a university, as individuals, in order for us not to get influence in daily life. We need to have some objective. And we always, as individuals, as a university, as people, we get distracted, very easily distracted by unreal influence. What is the ingredient that we need to develop as an individual, we, as a country?
I didn't hear the question properly. Could you say it again one more time?
We get distracted by various influences. As a nation, as individuals, we get distracted. That's maybe it's our nature. But if we are to change from this, we need to have some ingredients. We need to have something to change us. What is the ingredient that you think that we need to develop ourselves in order to be focused and not to get influenced by unreal?
Yeah. Well, the tools wise, again, around traveling the country, so three of us travel the country 10 days, and I think I saw many tools lying there, even we'll take as a tourism, right? I think this is the moment that Sri Lanka really need to define what tourist is. So if we can go that route, I think that might be a one tool. We have our own, the country ready for tourists. But what does tourist mean? How do define a tourist? If we do define a tourist a proper way and offer what we have, that might be a one tool that we can get rid of this so-called stress or financial issue, because most of the issues that we are relating right now is directed to a financial gain or financial loss. So then let's say, okay, financial as an issue. So then how do we use what is existing for us and take them as a tool and go into the world and bring the money? So I don't think that we need anything else if we can understand what we have. So again, comes to the point of mindfulness, doing those practices, you're trying to train yourself to see yourself through the process itself. More you do that, you start seeing those things that you have not seen earlier. It happened to me. So if you try that, you might see that. And then most of the young generation here in this culture, because every time I come to Colombo, I talk to them, even this trip I did, they sounds like they are lost. There are no proper counseling systems set up. There are no proper guiding systems set up. There are no proper mentoring systems set up. So we are doing mistake to our own children too. So this is the time as a parents, I think, we need to talk to our kids and show it to them, because they are already lost. Only most of the main intention they have in their mind is how quickly I can get out from this country. So if we can show them, and if we can try to understand with their feelings and show them what they can do within in this country, I think we can get out of this stress mode. It's not an easy thing. It will not happen overnight. I don't think, because me being Sri Lankan also, I have this intention of finding solution overnight. There is no overnight solution into this problem. We have to work with this, understand it and realizing it, process within ourselves. How do I take this issue and process within myself? And then the tools are right there. How many lakes we saw?
So many. So many.
Like, more you see the water, more you see the green, what else you need? So something wrong with us. That's what I feel. We just need to turn the switch a little bit. Wake up. Yes, wake up. More we see the stuff, because again, they were very impressed about Anuradhapura, Mihintala, all the area, right? So they always keep asking, oh, how many lakes? Too much of lake? Who did this? And da. Then we flew from Nuwara to Veeravilla. So that gives us to see everything in one point. How many lakes, how many mountains, how many greens we have. It's huge. And then they participated discussions with Buddhist monk to understand what these original teachings are. Then they changed the perspective. Okay, this makes sense. No, this is dada. We had an opportunity to argue. We have opportunity to agree with, right? That's what we need to let the world know. People will come here and invest the amount that even we cannot think about. That's why I said first, we have to redefine the tourist in this country.
Did it answer the question that you asked? To a certain extent, isn't it? As I understood, what you meant is what is not there, like the missing piece of jigsaw to make things change, so that even though we have appointed leaders, they are not leading the country. So we have a kind of a democratic system, so-called, but it is actually not democratic. So, and when people are given the opportunity to make a difference, they change it other way, right? So what is the missing piece? Where do we start with? So I think the main thing is the mindfulness. People don't, yeah. Yes, and it's not just waiting, as I understand, without waiting another person to lead, we have to let people understand how to lead themselves. And then they will be able to select the right leaders. So I think the missing part is that one, where with your support, of course, if we can start with the young generation, as Dr. Beverly said, they are holding the burden of the future. So we have done and spoiled the place, okay. So we should not let it happen to the next generation. So if we can give them the gift of mindfulness, which we did not taste, and yeah, and then we still have the Sangaratna with us to convey the message and all, and people are ready to listen to them still. So if we can bring that sunshine to the kids, like, of course, physically we have sunshine all the day throughout the year, but the sun is not shining in the mind. So if we can bring that difference to schools and the universities, as you said, like those who are graduating from the university, coming to your industry and not performing as you expect them and not practical enough, maybe something to do with their thinking. So if they get to know about the mindfulness and being in the present and then being more calm, and they would be able to, like, the solutions will come to their mind, and how to talk to people, how to work with materials and all that. So then I think that is where your contribution is going to be. Thank you very much for coming today. And on the last point, but not least, I would like to hear some words from the Hamdru on what Hamdru thinks about, like, taking mindfulness as a subject without wrapping it in the like coat of these traditions, the organized religious traditions, without putting it in that way, like taking it out and letting all the human beings in the world taste this and making a difference. So what do you think about it?
මෙතනින් අපි වැරදුණු තැන කොතනද එතනින් කොහොමද එළියට එන්නේ?
ඒක සිද්ධ වුණේ අතරම විශ්වාස ආශ්‍රයෙන් සියවසේ සිද්ධ වෙච්ච එකේ. එතන ඉඳලා අපි දාර්ශනිකව ගලාගෙන ආපු මුදතරනේ අපි ආගමක් බවට පරිවර්තනය කරලා ඒක වත්පිළිවෙත් ක්ලාසයක් බවට පත් කරා. ඒකේ ඛේදවාචකේ තමයි අපි නාම කියලා ඊළඟ කාරණේකට අපි පිළිදිමින් අතරම දැන් මේ මල්ලා ඒ ආරම්භ කරපු රිසර්ච් සෙන්ටර් එක අපි දන්නා අද බෞද්ධ ඇකඩමියාව ලෝකේ විවිධ අර්බුදාවන් පස්සේ ආර්ථික අර්බුද වේවා සමාජීය අර්බුද වේවා හැම අධ්‍යාත්ම විශ්වවිද්‍යාල වලට මේ රටවල් වල බාර දෙනවා මේකට මේ ප්‍රශ්නෙට විසඳුම හොයන්න. හැබැයි අපි තේරවාදී බෞද්ධ රටක් කියලා කිව්වට මේකට දැන් බෞද්ධ ආර්ථික දර්ශනයක් වෙනම තියෙනවා සමබාහිර ප්‍රතිපත්තියක්වත් අපිට අපේ රටට හදාගන්න. ඒකත් එක්ක දිනෙන් දින අපි හැදලා ඉන්නවා. ඉතින් අපි මෙතන ඉන්න හැමෝම අපි උදාහරණ කියලා අපි අදහන්නේ සහ ඒ ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නේ දානීය මහස්කුලය ඊළඟට පිළිමුල අපිට අපි දන්නවා කියන්නේ මෙතන මැක්ස් සයන්ස් කරන ගොඩක් අය. හැබැයි ඒ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලවල ඉන්නේ ඒ කියන්නේ මම හිතන්නේ ගොඩක් දිමාගිය පොඩි පූජා ගොඩක්ම පූජා කියන්නේ මගේ පුතාව විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයට යවන්න ඒකත් එක්ක උගෝගෙන අපි ඉන්නේ. ඒතර මෙන්නවා ගොඩක් ප්‍රශ්න මම අහගෙන හිටියා. ඉතින් මේ වුණ ක්‍රමවේදය ඇතුලේ බිසි ලයිෆ් එකක් ඇතුලේ කොහොමද අපේ ජීවිතයේ මේ මයින්ඩ්ෆුල්නස් කියන එක අපි යොදා ගන්න. ඒ භාවිතාවම අපිට කරගන්න ඕනේ අර ඥානයක් ඇතුලේ මොකද බුදුහාමුදුරුවෝ කියන එක අපි ටච් කරගෙන තියෙන බුදුහාමුදුරුවෝ වෙනත් කරන නිසා අපිට ඒක අල්ලගන්න තත්ත්වයක් තියෙනවා. අපේ උදා විහාරස්ථානයක් අපි කරන්නේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ට ආදරය. මම නැත්තම් මේ වපිරියෙත් ටික දෙනවා මිසක අපි අර ත්‍රිපිටකයේ කපන ටිකක් ඇතුලේ දාලා ඒක බ්ලොක් කරලා ලස්සනට මල් පාන් තියෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ අපි ධර්මයේ කියන එකක් වලට කියන්නේ ඒකේ හේතුවාචකේ තමයි
Yeah, I think Swamin Wahanse was not speaking for himself, he was speaking for the greater Sangha community. And so not all the Sangha, all the people in the Sangha community are like that, but at the majority vision is where we celebrate the cover of the rituals, and we get to the same trap of other organized religions as well, without actually practicing the kind of metta, mudita, and karuna, and those Brahma Vihara, where you can live like a Brahma while being a human being. But instead we go behind these things and showcase that I am the biggest donor, or kind of so like showcasing or like glorifying one's own self through the works in the religious activities. So yeah. Yes, you can translate best what.
No, I will explain to them because there are a lot that I need.
Yeah. So Hamdru was telling that without like actually giving the essence of Buddhism, the true Buddhism, that which is the mindfulness. And I think Buddha is explaining once that a Buddha comes to world to talk about Paticca Samuppada and Satipatthana. So without giving that, so the monks are giving something else in the bigger perspective. So like if we practice if we learn the like interdependence of the things, whereas it is explained in Paticca Samuppada, Dr. Gamini will explain better slowly. It takes many hours to explain those things, as you say. So instead of that, we are much towards to like offering flowers and all that. So that is there. So yeah, we can start teaching that in temples, but also without like getting separated as to a religion, we can talk to people, like to think about it as people in general manner. So thank you very much, Swamin Wahanse, for that unbiased kind of explanation on where we took the different turn. And thank you very much. And so we have come to the end of the session, and we have taken about 10 minutes more than what we expected, beyond 6:30. Is it already 7, sir? No. I cannot see the clock from here. 6:50 already. Yeah, so thank you very much for your patience and participation from various departments, and especially research students. And there are some of your relations as well. I learned from them, and some of your colleagues from maybe from your childhood or the school days. And thank you very much for coming today to explain us about mindfulness in a different perspective, where usually we all tend to think about mindfulness in the Buddhist way, thinking that, oh, it's Buddhism, something that we can be happy of, proud of, like that. But then, no, it is about being a person, being a human being. So thank you for bringing that kind of opening to the mindfulness. And I'm sure we will do some more research, especially on how to change thinking of people, and then how to contribute the school children and the young men and women in the university as well. So thank you very much. Thank you. And I invite Jayat to finish the session. Thank you.
Wow, I think that was a very insightful discussion that we had. Once again, I would like to thank Dr. Jim, Dr. Beverly, and Dr. Gamini, and also Dr. Inoka here, who participated in the event and gave us this wonderful discussion. So, as we are way past the deadline that we had, I would like to conclude it here. I would like to conclude by saying one quote from Lord Buddha, that is, what we think is what we become. So mind is the most powerful weapon that we as human beings have. We are not strong like elephants. We are not strong like lions. We are not fast like cheetahs. We are not fast like eagles. We do not have the eyesight of an eagle. We do not have the eyesight of a cheetah. We do not have the flexibility of a chimpanzee. So we are way past those capabilities. But one thing that have actually enabled us to dominate this entire world as a species is our mind. Our mind is stronger than any of the above that I mentioned. So that is what has led us to become who we are today. So I urge you to be mindful and talk with these valuable people, and I would like to conclude this session now. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you.